So, okay, now I'm actually hearing myself louder. Welcome again, everybody. I have great pleasure to introduce Robertina Šebjanič. We know each other for quite a while now, and the way we connected was when she was working with jellyfish, and I was working with octopi, and then I started working with planktons, and she started working with other underwater issues, and we ended up going on a ship, National Geographic ship, with 5 Nobel laureate scientists to kind of see what we can do at the Galapagos Islands. So we're constantly in touch. If I land in Ljubljanica, that's where I stay. And I have to say, Robertina is completely a dedicated activist artist. She really, truly engages climate change and really is concerned about underwater in particular. So when we were in the Galapagos, she was off with her hydrophones, just grabbing more and more material. And there's something coming with that. Now, what we're seeing tonight is actually more local to her. It's the river Ljubljanica, which is right in Ljubljana in Slovenia. And she will show us and tell us. So without further ado, let's give her a really warm welcome. You want to say something?
So I would just say, thank you for coming on Friday afternoon to this place. And first of all, also thank you, Victoria Vesna and Anu, to invite me to be part of Atmo of the Sound. I was super excited. The invitation came before COVID happened. The idea was that I will work physically here in Los Angeles with the river. Another river happened in Slovenia in between with some other commission, but then we kind of merged these two different ideas and concepts. For today, for the performance, I invite you also, because we are in the immersive space. For me, it's nice also if you walk around, if you want to just explore it through different perspectives. And just short intro into the work. The idea of this work is actually you come to the river, it's really hot, nice summer day. You fell asleep and then you hear different stories being told by different creatures. And more we will speak later, and I'm really excited also for the panel discussions with excellent guests. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robertina. So Robertina is going to do a live performance for approximately 20 to 30 minutes. We'll take a 5-minute break while we assemble our panelists, and then we'll have about a 45-minute conversation that we encourage you all to be active participants in. unfortunately, I must explain that we have to stay behind this line or else we cannot be captured on the live stream. So we will be sitting here in the darkness so we can be seen on the live stream. But we ask you to please come closer so we're not so lonely over here. Yes, I will bring my theater training to bear on this panel. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Ivana, can you hear us now? Text me and tell me that you can, will you? I've got our wonderful assistant director of the Art Science Center watching our live stream from New York to tell us whether it's good or not. Let's see, is it good? It's good. Okay, thank you, Ivana. And I'm glad you're here with us, so welcome. Welcome to our Atmosphere of Sound panel number 1. So as you may know, Atmosphere of Sound, Sonic Art in Times of Climate Disruption is an exhibition and a series of performances that Victoria and I have curated for Getty PST. We opened with a sound installation by Bill Fontana at Royce Hall that was audible from September through November. And we also had an inaugural exhibition in the gallery with artwork by Amber Stuckey and Katie Grinnan. That show closed in the very beginning of November, and Robertina's exhibition is our second exhibition of 6. And we're featuring works by artists outside the gallery as well. We have Nina Weissman's work on view right now down at the CNSI Gallery, and we'll be featuring 13 artists in total over the course of the academic year. So next quarter we'll have 2 more exhibitions, and in the spring we'll have 2 more exhibitions after that. But today, Victoria is here not as a co-curator, but really as an artist in her own right. And I'm very pleased to introduce to you our panel. So immediately to my right, we have Alex Hall, who is a climate scientist here at UCLA and has been working on drought and fire and the impact of water and the lack of water on our climate and our environment for a couple decades now. Yeah. We have Lauren Vaughn, the founder of the Metabolic Studio, who is a wonderful artist and philanthropist based here in LA. And she has an exhibition, solo exhibition at Honor Fraser right now called Concrete is Fluid. And she's also featured in 2 other PST exhibitions. What's it called? Energy Fields, right? Energy Fields at Chapman, which is the Fulcrum Arts exhibition, also a sound art exhibition. And then Brackish Water at CSU Dominguez Hills, which deals with the subject of water, clean water, as does our panel today. Robertina needs no introduction and also has already been introduced, but Robertina Šebjanič is an artist based in Ljubljanica, Slovenia, and we're very lucky to have her here with us in LA today. Haley Marks is a scientist with the ALMS Laser Microscopy Lab and is based at CNSI, which is also partner to the Art Science Center. And in addition to many other wonderful things about her, she has done work on various states of water, states of matter that water takes up that we might not be aware of. And she's also collaborated with Victoria on Victoria's most recent project, along with Walter Geckelman, who I think I saw. Did Walter leave? Anyway, they are both collaborators with Victoria on her most recent project called Sunflower Plasma. And last but of course not least, we have Victoria Vesna. Dr. Victoria Vesna is the founder of the Art Science Center, professor in design media arts, and my esteemed colleague, and a wonderful artist whose work deals with the natural environment and the built environment and deep engagement with all forms of scientific research. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Anna.
So I have a few questions, and we don't have a million hours, unfortunately, because I have a million hours worth of questions. But I'm just going to start by giving Victoria and Lauren maybe a quick moment to introduce their practices by answering the following question. How do artists approach the topic of water differently than scientists? Or we could say any of these topics that intersect between arts, sciences, material. And how are these viewpoints compatible in your view? So maybe briefly tell us about 1 or 2 projects that you've done dealing with water, and tell us a little bit about how scientific research has informed how you work.
I'll let Lauren start.
Oh my goodness. Wait a minute. Okay. So I first of all want to congratulate Robertina on an amazing piece of work, and my whole endocrine system just went into the cold and luxurious velvety world that you created. So I'll start by saying this is what artists do so well, is create a liminal space that I can go to imagine myself a frog or a fish or a plant or the dust that settles on the bottom of a river. And these speculative states of being, these liminal states, I think are very much what both artists and scientists do, is we start from the known and we go into the unknown, and the way that we meander together creates a kind of portrait of the world we occupy. So I'm not sure there's a binary there, but rather a kind of different way of braiding and folding in on each other, which I thought was so present in Robertina's almost lenses and blurred boundaries as well. I thought it was a really wonderful portrayal of the speculation itself into the river and into the water. So I'll let Vesna.
I got one.
Okay. Okay.
So I have Haley sitting right next to me, so I'm just going to use you as an example because we collaborate. By necessity, she has to really narrow down to the one cell and go deep into it. And I come in and I go, whoa, what's that? And how do we connect it to our bodies, our environment, our planet, our social issues? And we started having these discussions. So to me, it's always a long-term process. It takes me from 3 to 5 years to do a piece. And right now, I'm actually working with Haley as a microbiologist going into advanced light microscopy. It's fantastic, actually, the work she does. But by necessity, it has to be reductionist, the way the science is conducted. And then, of course, the framework is pretty intense because there's deadlines, there's huge budgets. When we get $10,000, we're happy. When they get millions, they're happy. So it's like a very different scale of expectations. But I think it's a real necessity. My feeling is that the separation of art and science is really artificial. And it started with the industrial age, and it keeps going, but it's starting to erode with the technology, with the communication, with us using, we both use computers. So when I was trained a little bit, I could get it because I'm using the same tool. So I will pass it on to Haley. Yes or no?
Well, actually, I want to ask one more question of the artists in the panel, just to give people context.
Got it. Okay.
And then we're going to go. I promise the scientists will get their due. I promise. But I just quickly want to ask Robertina and Lauren to talk us briefly through specifically how you worked with scientific research in the projects that you're showing us now. So for Concrete is Fluid, how did you work with researchers, climate scientists, water researchers? Who all were you working with? Obviously engineers as well, and how? And then Robertina, give us a little background into the research that went into creating the piece.
Well, material science, for one, is interesting because concrete feels so solid. But in fact, what gives it its solidity is that it's fluid. It never dries. So when we choose concrete for infrastructure, it's because the heating and cooling of concrete allows for it not to fracture. So this is something I learned from material scientists, that I was able to come to understand the impermanence of things that are permanent. Now, currently, I'm working with a biologist who I think is here today, Diego, is he still here? Who actually is a recent biologist graduate on the discovery that underneath the concrete of the LA River is a whole aquatic world. It is actually a ceiling of an underland. And trying to understand how is it possible that for 80 years we could bury the living floodplain of the primordial city. And somehow think we had destroyed it, when in fact we probably protected it from industrialization and bad practices. So we're working in a kind of co-creative way to understand both what is alive in this material, how old is it, paleobotanical testing is going on, empirical evidencing of what's growing out of this soil that we've extracted from underneath the concrete, including ferns that no paleobotanist even knew existed in Los Angeles, in this area. So there's a balance of empirical and scientific work going on, and then by extension from that, thinking now that we know that those systems are alive, understanding that they're alive through entanglements with other living systems. They're not alive because they've been isolated and kept separate. So now that we are about to pull water from the LA River in order to redirect it back into what would have been its floodplain, we're bound by code to kill the water in order to make it safe for us to be near it. So part of what we're doing with the scientists is seeing if we can match code for Title 22 with other forms of agency, especially sound. So I work with mostly empirical pseudoscience to explore that, and that pseudoscience has catalyzed an interest in actual science. So sometimes, like in Spinal Tap, what we do as artists creates the plausibility that there's something there worth exploring.
Robertina.
No, it's really interesting what you have been saying, no, Laura, and I would just like to fill it up. Okay, the piece which you saw is actually about the basin of the river of, the main name is Ljubljanica, but it has actually 7 names, because in the history, people didn't realize it's the same body of water which is like floating, because it goes through the Kars region where it goes into the caves and above up and so on. So that's also parts of the video which you saw. It was shot in the caves. I went down in with the speleologist because there's some specific caves, and it's not the easiest accessible, I would say, but for projects we do many things, I would say. And the piece before this piece was actually first river research I did was in Madrid with river Manzanares. And it's very interesting river because, okay, this one is a bit more watery, I would say, but with rivers we always forget, and I like that you speak about what is happening with soil also, because the soil levels of the river, geological levels, they are like also moving a bit slower than the water, slower than what we see, different creatures living in different levels down, but they're still existing and being present. And in Madrid, for instance, okay, there was also a bit of a sound, because for me sound is one of the ways how we can go beyond just us humans. I try that always, to try to hear the others also, or give them the agency to be heard. And but there I was also working with the smell. So we have been contracting the geo stripes, and then every 1 meter we kind of develop a smell. And it was really interesting when I was working with scientists on that, and they understood that smell is smelly thing, no? It's not like, and then the perfume company came in because they connected us with them, and they couldn't understand why we want to have like organic, smelly situation instead of the, I don't know, something which would be more elaborated, I would say. But I wanted to connect it with smell because smell is an interesting trigger of the memory. And it's also in the scientific research used a lot for that kind of stuff, but then also, yeah, there is many stories to tell further. But yeah, so the river agencies, I started to work with in Spain, then I was invited to Slovenia, then invitation came for here, but I never managed to come. But But when Anu and Victoria presented me your work, it was really interesting, and it was really nice to speak about rivers, especially now in the context. So, yeah.
Okay, scientist question. So Lauren mentioned this fluid aspect of concrete. And Haley and I had a nice little layover in San Jose Airport a few months ago, just by chance. And she explained to me all these wonderful things about water that I had no idea even existed. So Haley, can you explain to us what's going on with the concrete? What's going on with the water? What is this thing where these substances can appear liquid but not actually be liquid, or appear solid and not actually be solid? What's happening at the molecular level?
So I'm trying to remember exactly.
I think we were telling me
what
about how
concrete
water
is.
takes.
So
a
I don't know
plasma
the answer
state.
to the concrete
I guess
question
what I would
because
say
I
is
don't know anything
water
about concrete.
takes a plasma state, and I
Yeah.
think concrete also takes a plasma state in the sense that it's essentially a suspension that's moving at an incredibly slow rate.
Yeah. So I guess when I think of water, I'm thinking about it on a molecular scale. So I'm thinking, H2O, right? So my body is an oxygen and my fists are hydrogens, right? And if we're talking about how we, look at how do we know water is water from another clear liquid? We'll just start with that. Like if I have two clear liquids in a jar, how do I know this one's water and this one is not something else if I can't touch them? So I can't measure the viscosity, I can't freeze them or heat them up or whatever. How can I tell with some other way? So the way I would do that is with something that's called Raman spectroscopy or vibrational spectroscopy, or you can also do this with FTIR, a different kind of spectroscopy. But it's essentially a way to measure use a molecular vibration to tell what something's chemical structure is. So it's called chemical fingerprinting, and you've probably interacted with this if you've ever been stopped at the airport and swiped. If they swipe down your laptop and then they go put that in a little thing, the little spectra that they're looking at that comes back is a bunch of little, lines and peaks that are representative of when you shoot a laser at a molecule, it will do a little wiggle dance, and those little wiggle dances bring up something like that, and that's how you can tell sort of like a barcode of what chemical something is. And so if you're looking at the different states of something, how do you know when something has entered a different, a fluid state, or it's entered a different molecular configuration? So it's gone from, let's say you've excited the molecule, it's gone from ground state to excited state. So now it's instead of being a ball-shaped electron cloud, it's two little flower-shaped electron clouds. So you can measure that with these types of spectroscopies. And so it makes these kind of visual processes where you're saying, okay, this is the same material, why has it suddenly changed its state of matter? You can see what the kind of chemical mechanism was from these types of spectra, which are vibrations, which are kind of ties into the whole sound and light thing.
And it seems like at a certain level of subatomic observation, perhaps sound and light are not different.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, there's also something called the photoacoustic effect, which is when you shoot something with a laser and it creates a small voltage, which then creates a sound wave, a pressure wave. This is how they make, it's kind of like a fancier version of ultrasound that's getting more and more popular. And you can, there's also there's a new microscope at CNSI, which we could look at sometime, but it's called Brillian spectroscopy, which I'm not pronouncing right. It's a French name, which is sort of the equivalent of the Raman spectroscopy I was saying, but with sound, with phonons instead of photons. So what you can do with that is measure the elasticity of something, so measure how, what the Young's modulus of a material would be. So again, with maybe the concrete example, you could tell exactly what the stress and strain of that material is from the way sound interacts with that material. And so they're very analogous topics that get talked about in the same kind of scientific circle.
Thank you.
And I'm sure Alex thinks about water on a totally different, larger, more meaningful scale than just one little water molecule at a time like I do. So you think about maybe how water affects the rest of the world in its various forms. But
yes, so the question for you is, how does water hold ecosystems together?
Yeah, I can address that, but I want to return to the first question also, because I think that's an interesting one. I think, first of all, I couldn't think of a better way to spend the end of my Friday than to watch this and to experience this. It was really, really amazing. And I think it really, at the highest level, just gets you to care about a river, which is something that I think is hard to get people to do. I really was reflecting also on the limitations of science and when it comes to ecosystems. I think that where we are now with our understanding of a system like a river is that we try to blend together or bring together different disciplines like atmospheric science to understand precipitation and hydrology, to understand how that aggregates into streams, and ecologists to understand species within a river and how they interact with their environment. But it's a little bit like Kaiser Permanente. That's our one of our health insurance companies here. When they take the human body, they divide it into different organs and systems, and it really just doesn't add up to a person. And there's a little bit of that with environmental science, that we have the ability to understand these individual components quite well, and we have really sophisticated tools, but the whole is something that we can't capture. And when you zoom in on something like a river and you see this universe that's every bit as busy and complicated as the human system that you hinted at in that piece, you really get a sense of wonder that I think our scientific knowledge just can't quite get to. And that's, I think, where art can be so powerful. Again, because you get a sense of that complexity and dynamics in a system like this river, but you're not quantifying it or understanding its dynamics like a scientist would want to, but it does get you to the point of caring about it, which is, I think, what we need people to do. So I think, I was reflecting again on the limitations there. And that does touch on, I think, your question also, which is how we think about water. So.
Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about your research, too, that might kind of contextualize how you think about it? Yeah, sure.
I come to this space from the perspective of climate modeling and trying to understand our future, and modeling the physical system, atmosphere, ocean, land, hydrology. And I do a lot of work in California to understand the impacts of climate change on water. We have a big water sustainability issue here, and also the strong relationship between water and fire. And we have a mega fire challenge here, which you all are probably pretty aware of. So those are things that I have come to interact a lot with people across disciplines because of my work in water and fire, and now I'm here talking to you all, which is really, really a pleasure. And I also, relating back to the work that I do in California, I think only one of our rivers in California is not impounded by a reservoir. And so all of our water, our ability to have agriculture, for example, in the Central Valley and have a metropolis like Los Angeles really comes at a big price. And the life of hundreds of rivers has been strangled by the needs of our I guess needs are in quotes here, the civilization that we have, the demands, right? And so, that's another, I think, strong connection point between this piece and some other work that I do.
So actually, I'm going to kind of rephrase the next question on that basis, because I think both you and Lauren have raised some really interesting ideas that I can work into the next question, which is, I was going to ask something more about this question of the agency of sound, because that's really interesting. It came up when Lauren and I were having a pre-conversation, and I think it is this entity in our project where sound has its own kind of autonomous energy. So maybe I'll start with that, is to put that out to you to think about what's the agency of sound in your work, in this show, in the ecosystem. And then, and I'll follow it up with another question after that.
So imagine the continent, the North American continent, and imagine it 160 to 200 years ago. And imagine specifically the territory between the Rocky Mountains and the Atlantic Ocean, and the Gulf of Mexico and the Alaskan plains. And imagine big herds of migrating North American bison that would go along the foothills of mountains, avoiding the mud plains. And they'd go in packs of thousands. And as they went, their hoofs would be stomping on the ground. And imagine for a minute you were the massive water table that existed underneath the crust of the ground, and those great prairie grasses that they fed on. Their roots went way deep into the water, and as the bison ran, they pounded like a drum on that water table, creating movement and flow on an acoustic level that vibrated the life and the potentiality of those grasses and became part of the fertility of place. So from the very beginning, at least in Kabbalistic thought, when they say in the beginning was the Word, and the Word is the unknowable stood for the idea of vibration, right? So vibration is the fundamental concept behind material presencing on this planet. It is what comes first in mystical thinking. And when I think about our place in the world, I rarely think about Los Angeles or Southern California. When I think about ecosystem, I think about homeland and the complexity of it. Ecos comes from the Greek word for home. And a system is about the whole complex organism that makes it a home. And what I would like to put out there is that we're actually living between the snowcap of the Rocky Mountains and the snowcap of the Sierras in one cyborg watershed that has been entirely harnessed to create water and power for a network of 40 cities that are sharing the same system of potentiality. But it doesn't mean that we've lost nature. It just means that we live in something like a glitch ecology that is no longer a binary between nature and urbanism. There is a glitch ecology that's alive in places like the LA River or the LA Aqueduct. It's a both and. It's no longer functioning in its full potentiality, but it is functioning, and all kinds of ecosystems are making it home. So those systems do not rely on one perfect imagined utopian place. It requires a reimagination of sorts. And for us at Metabolic Studio, sound is a critical component in that, because we try and vibrate things into their potential, highest potential of living in the most unlikely place to be doing that, which is the edge of the LA River in the industrial corridor.
I can tackle that quickly. This is a little bit, maybe in this, I'm too scientific, but, I think they, if you look at, I don't know if you've seen the kind of cameras and when they look at the world the way a bee sees it, you see different frequencies of light, and you see that there's really a world out there that our eyes are not tuned to because we can't see those wavelengths. And there's something similar with sound. There are sounds that we're not sensitive to, and there's therefore a world that we can't perceive. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at with your piece, is that there's like a translation problem that we can address through art, for example, and I think that when you experience those sounds, it is both relatable and also alien. You get a sense of the alienness of it, but also the reality of it, which is and maybe the depth of it. So I think there's a I see it as like a mechanism to translate.
So to tap into both what Lauren and you are saying, the glitch especially, I was talking to Robertina and she's actually experimenting with AI. So in fact, those voices you hear, I was like, what is that? It's explanations about the river. And really, if you think about where we all here share, something that's important to us is the vibration and the sound, and also to realize that when you come to the level that Haley works in, it doesn't have to be output as an image. It's vibration. She's looking at light and vibration. She's not looking at image. She could absolutely put that out as a vibration that then is amplified and sped up so we can hear it. And to really start listening is key for humanity. We're just overwhelmed too much with visuals. So a strategy that I think we all share a bit is to make visual candy that makes you listen. So it's really the opposite of how generally sound is kind of created with a lot of works, it doesn't matter. It's like an afterthought, or even like in the movie industry, you do it after you've done the movie. This is actually before, and it's in tandem, so that you're watching this and it's repetitious, kind of forces you to listen and to look at what's going on, but the listening is the important part. And what do we do not hear is really what's important. What's completely inaudible, there's so much. We're so narrow humans. It's just kind of sad, actually. So this is where we come in to really amplify these vibrations and bring them to the public, and sound an alarm, and nobody's listening. So sometimes I feel is like years of this work we've been doing, all of us here actually, whether artists or scientists. What happened? Nothing. Like it really makes me question, what are we doing? Why are we relentlessly trying to raise awareness, and yet it's getting worse and worse and worse with the environment and ecology. Just to say one thing, today I was listening to Bezos, kind of came up to me on YouTube with his plan to take trash out and put it in space. Have you? Yeah, and at first I thought this couldn't be, but he kept going. He was actually explaining how we can keep going with the fossil fuel, we can keep going with everything, but all the waste we can just throw into space, which is like...
There's no sound in space.
There's no sound in space. That's also questionable, but that's another story.
No, in a vacuum, there's no air, and all sound is pressure, right? It's just it's things moving through air. So without air, there is no pressure. I'm like, no, you're wrong. You have to beat the facts. But speaking of pollution, I mean, when light and sound, like Victoria was saying, we really don't see or hear hardly anything as humans. And if we think that we're overwhelmed with noise pollution, or if you get annoyed by a leaf blower, imagine what that leaf blower sounds like to the bugs that just got blown out of wherever they were just laying under the brush, and they can possibly hear even worse, louder frequencies. People, I mean, if you think the sun, UV damage in your eyes is bad, or lights from buildings at night, like imagine what it's like to a bird who has more cones and more receptors than you. So it's something to kind of consider as you make things too, like sometimes making big, bright, flashy things. If you don't know, how much the infrared light that's shooting out and how many other creatures around that can see it, it's something to kind of consider.
Who's your audience?
Who's your audience in the micro world as well? Yeah, your ecological audience.
No, but I would just add it on this, 1/3 of the rivers of the world, they are just free floating. 2/3 of the rivers all over the world, they are in construction of some kind of concrete or similar materialities. So what it does also sound-wise, it does resonates, echoing from bouncing sound, and my main research is actually in the oceans, but rivers kind of came across, it's also water environment, which is very connected, so you cannot absolutely not ignore it. But my first naive idea of when I went first time to record with hydrophone was I go to record fish, and I was the first thing what you have to figure it out is like you don't hear fish because you hear all the boats and machinery and us humans, because I put the hydrophone, of course, in the harbor, and I was like, well, where is the fish, you know? And then I was trying to edit the thing, you know, to kind of Photoshop, you know, like clear the sound that I will hear only the natural sound. And then I realized I just tried to portray the nature which is not existing. It's just like the, you know, like when you have this yearly catalog on the wall, you know, that it looks pretty, but that's it, no? So, especially sonic world, because as you made a joke about like there is no sound in the space, there was this idea about like beautiful sonic space in the oceans, no? And many times it happens. I have also one piece which is about noise pollution in the ocean. It's actually hardcore noise techno performance, and people sometimes don't read before they come. You know, and then they are surprised with where is all these beautiful sounds of whales and, you know, like whatever you hear on YouTube, you know, or wherever you perceive this information that should be the sound of the ocean. But then I'm like, no, I'm just like presenting you what I record, you know, so this is the sound which I hear. And yeah, the pristine nature do exist in some specific limitations of natural parks and so on, which thanks God there is some of them, no? But even there it's always, but you know, when I'm there, of course I come there with boat also. I did the pollutants during the way. And there's always this kind of questions how to go around this, and like what Victoria started to say, we speak about all this crisis, we are aware of the crisis. Like yesterday when I came to LA, I was shocked how polluted the air was. You could feel it in your throat, that you know. So it's very present. And then also I have a question actually for you, because you also work with atmosphere, no? Because you know, atmosphere is just like other variation of the ocean. I see it like that. You know, because we are just living on this floor of another water system, which is maybe not the same physics as rivers and oceans and so on, but it has other materiality. And then because here LA has these specifics, so this kind of pollutants are resonating inside of that, no? So I can also perceive it on the micro level, as you're saying that, okay, I went. But yeah, just like it's interesting to see how you scientists are reflecting that, you know, and what we all could do something about it or not. Like, what is our role even, you know, how to navigate the eco-anxiety in the time when we, you know, like activism, yes, great, but we should go beyond that, you know, like one person maybe can change, but it has to have position.
Question, Robertina. You set me up perfectly. Okay, so the final question, because we are coming on the end of our hour, and I do want to leave a little bit of time for folks in the audience to ask questions too, please, if you'd like. So the last question I'm going to ask you is, I guess the way I'll put it is, Victoria likes to talk about how to do this work. You have to go into the belly of the beast, right? You can't do this work without, you have to get on the boat, right? You have to pull out the earth mover. It's not, I'm going to keep my hands clean. I'm going to live a perfectly ecologically aligned lifestyle, and I'm going to do this work. So my question for all of you is about complex systems of governance, of regulation, of ecosystems themselves. How do you negotiate that to do the work that you do? And how do you use your influence? I'm going to start with Lauren, because I know you have a lot to say about this. How do you use your influence? How much time do you need to make these things happen that, you know, are not just individual activism, that happen on a more complex scale than that?
Okay. Good question. First of all, I think Newton Harrison and Helen Harrison like to ask their students at the beginning, how big is here, right? So first of all, in thinking about agency, I think you have to decide where you are and how big here is for you, so that you define the field, right? So for me, I feel that my agency or my area of cognitive agency is the Intermountain West. Ecosystem-wise, it's the snowpack of two mountain ranges, the Sierra and the Rocky Mountains, which means that the agency that I try and work at involves a number of different jurisdictions, but I'm going to talk specifically about making protocol changes within the California government. So I have focused my practice at Metabolic Studio on the agency I can have to make protocol adjustments within Caltrans, California water rights, and California state parks, and Bureau of Sanitation in the city of Los Angeles. So within the Intermountain West, the state of California is the target area for protocol adjustments because bureaucracies are adverse to innovation. It requires artists to say, well, what if we did this, right? And they're like, well, who's going to take liability on that? And then I get the Annenberg Foundation to say, we'll do it. And the rationale behind that is to turn capital into infrastructure to distribute water instead of capital, money. So the justification for me being allowed to spend $10 million to put a redirection mechanism under the LA River's concrete is to bring 106 acre feet of wastewater that would normally go out to sea to the LA State Historic Park and Albion Park. So what I have done over a 10-year period of time is get 106 federal, state, and local permits to do this. That's a network of performances where I went into more than 100 offices and told that story and got people's sign-off. Would I do it? Yes. And I have the paperwork that I exhibit. Would I recommend other people do that? No. Why? Because unless you have a philanthropic agency behind you, how are you going to make a profit and have a staff that can wait for all of those permits to go? So now we're moving strictly into part B of my protocol, which I call post-legitimate practice. The only way forward within that watershed or that ecosystem to work is post-legitimate exercise. What we're doing is, while we're busy getting the protocol adjustment on how to get the 106 acre feet of water cleaned to give to the state park, we are bootlegging water going over the bridges to actually make post-legitimate cleanup jobs on brownfields as performances every full moon with community. So if you would like to come to that and you're feeling frustrated about ecological doom scrolling on your iPhone, show up on January 13th, which is a Sunday, for the first unpaving of a single parking lot in Lincoln Heights with students from Confluence MFA in New Mexico who are coming out to work on this as a class. The next generation wants to roll up their sleeves, get out their jackhammers and repair the watersheds, and they are going to do it, and we're going to support them.
It was pretty good. It was pretty concise, yeah.
It was a good summary of 10 years apart.
Yeah. I don't think they're easy answers. I mean, obviously there aren't. Otherwise, we would be doing things. But I think that that we all need to be a little bit more open to other disciplines, other ways of thinking, other approaches. I think that going back to the sound issue, to listening, I think, to other people. I do think finding ways to give voices to nature is, again, along with going with the theme of tonight's performance. I think and even maybe eventually political agency to nature, I think, is something that we should aim for, and political agency to future generations, which is something that we don't have. But I think it has to start with really loosening up the silos that we have between disciplines, between sectors, and really trying to build our own networks across systems in our thinking. So I know that's a lot, but feels like that's next.
Victoria, is that
Follow up what Lauren is talking about. I have a little bit of a different strategy. It's also long term, but when I found out that planktons produce 80% of the air we breathe, I wanted to create a piece that basically we destroy the planktons and we destroy our own air, and to create an awe about these creatures. So even though they're micro creatures, I was blowing them up as big as whales. There's a picture here. But that's as an example to bring in the awe and at the same time the wonder, because we all want clean water. So I'm really interested in consciousness and how all these elements we're talking about, the fire, water, air, earth, and space, how it shapes us and how we can all start looking at ourselves as a planet. And one of the things that I'm now working with Walter Geckelman, with the plasma physicists, they're recreating the sun for a split second, right? But you could actually have all energy for the entire planet of one day of the energy of the sun, right? So to think about how is this planet or the sun this affecting our planet that's 10,000 times smaller than us, now in the solar maximum, right? To really bring up to people, hey, we're in the solar maximum phase, which means huge amounts of magnetic fields are coming at us, solar flares, and you can see it and how it's magnifying good stuff and bad stuff, and anger and violence and droughts, and how water and fire connect, and it's going to keep going through 2025. So if we all knew about that, we would start thinking, whoa, we're a small planet, let's kind of work together as a human community rather than one against the other, or ideologies, etc. A lot of times I feel like it's a losing battle, but we try.
Sometimes they're kind of pretty. The flares make the aurora, so at least when the sun explodes, it'll be really pretty. Really pretty. Just view optically.
So I would just, well, this is another conversation for another 30 minutes, I think. I would just go back first, like Alex, what you have been mentioning. I'm really glad that this resonated to the work. It's like, because what I try to bring out is like this, I call it empathic strategies. It's like the way how to connect with the otherness of agency of whomever you want, to give them also the space, which is very important to understand. And, sometimes I think humans, we are failing in our human relationships already, there is still lots of, in Europe we are quite stressed now with the war situations, which they're very near to us, and I'm coming from Balkans, living that, so it's kind of like some other stress coming also. And one of my newest research is actually working with chemical imprints of the leaking unexploded munition, which is like lots of it in oceans. I think next to LA it's like huge situation of that. So it's like it's always this kind of thinking, like as Victoria said, and in ecology especially, that I also work with these scientists which they are working with these unexploded devices, and we speak about it, how many of them they are like piling in this moment again. And we do speak about sustainability, how we want to change everything, I will clean everything, but then somebody drops a bomb and we go 50 years back. Like this is the best example of situations which we are dealing with. And, you know, bomb can be also represented in different ways, you know, also waste. Like toxic waste is also the same, you know, it's like there is so much of it leaking all around. We even didn't speak about microplastic and so on because, you know, we are all full, you know, our heads and our news is full of it, so, and our bodies also, so it's changing already, you know, so how to navigate these changes, it's a very good question, you know, it's like some of the artists or some of the scientists that propose to even like embrace it, you know, there's always this kind of optimistic views, and there's lots of dystopian slash dark futures, but which us sitting here, maybe we will not experience them so strongly, but next generations definitely, no? So it's always like this empathic strategy through the generations would be also interesting to develop a bit differently, not just generations of my offspring, but also of somebody else's or some, you know, how to think for other, no? And how to think about other, either is the tree or rock or, you know, concrete or some other creature. But yeah.
Thank you. That's a great place to end. It is 6 o'clock. I don't know if we have to absolutely leave right now or if I have time to open it for 1 or 2 questions. You think we can take 10 more minutes? Anybody have a question or a comment that you want to share with the panel? Everyone looks very tired. Okay, one in the back, yes. Hi. Here.
Hello. Thank you guys for such a wonderful panel. It was really inspiring. I guess I'm curious, and right now am working with this kind of question. When we think about amplifying nature's voice, do we have to, or is it, how can we, I guess, how can we think about nature's privacy? Are we thinking about privacy, or is privacy kind of this very human, individualist notion of wanting to protect ourselves given, I don't know, how does amplifying nature's voice not become extraction?
It's a question for another panel, I think.
Well, I think, you know, to bring it back to the question of agency, which
Yeah.
I think relates to your question, if we understand non-human entities as having autonomy and agency, privacy is one of the ways that we defend our autonomy against encroachment. So we could broaden that and say, how do we respect the agency and the autonomy of non-humans? And I think I would bring that back to Robertina's point. We're very bad at respecting the agency and autonomy of humans. Why would we assume that we would do better with non-humans?
No, but also, like, you know, is individuality needed for some specific communities? You know, like volvox, like interesting microorganismic algae, they coexist in that situation. So this kind of coexistence is also something that we should not forget. Individualism is like taking you away from that. So it's like, I think it's very, I think you triggered you.
I thought of something. No, no, you go first. No, you're the clown. Okay. I guess I thought of a negative way of, you know, kind of exploiting. There's a version of the Planet Earth series called Planet Earth Cities, and it's about animals and how they adapt to different cities. And one of the things they cover is, you know, these turtles. Everybody knows the turtles that follow the city lights instead of the moon, so they go the wrong way. And so there's a bunch of people who make a mission to go out and redirect the turtles. But from an ecological, like an evo-devo standpoint, that's actually bad because you're training them to rely on humans to flip them around. You know, it's like you're domesticating them, you know. So there becomes a question of, like, sometimes you should just let nature be nature, and it will, life will find a way on its own, which means you need to let things die. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think privacy is a human concept. But I do think that yeah, there's a risk of exploitation, and I'm sure the nature films that we have enjoyed probably have involved damage, right, in some ways to ecosystems that is not filmed. But I guess I feel like in a context where, whole ecosystems are just being destroyed, and that I think their right to life and existence is the most important thing that we need to develop, and so I feel like that's such a huge such a huge heavy thing that it feels a little bit like like focusing on their privacy, and with that it feels a little bit too that we're trying to impose a human concept on them that might not be totally appropriate. That's my reaction. Yeah.
But our next artist coming up in January, Yolanda Harris, has been working with footage, video and audio footage collected from whales by marine biologists at UC Santa Cruz, and we're going to do a panel in January about her work and in context. And this comes up a lot in that work because, on the one hand, the biologists are attaching technology to the whales, and in order to collect this material, they're trying to be as inobtrusive as possible, but they are, in fact, using harpoons to stick these suction cup recorders on the whales. They're not getting consent. And eventually the stuff falls off. The whales keep going, and then they collect that. And then she makes work with that. And one of the questions that we've been asking ourselves is that a collaboration? Because the whales aren't choosing to participate. So even though I wouldn't say it's exploitative in the sense that it's not harming them in any way, but you're extracting data, and the scientists are looking at it as we're extracting this data so we can help them by monitoring their environment, monitoring their trajectories. But I do think it comes to what Haley was saying about the turtles. At what point are you intervening because you want to correct for your previous interventions as human beings, when in fact you should just leave well enough alone? So come back in January and ask us that question again. One more? Please.
Hi, I'm a composer, also sound artist. I just want to say thank y'all for this inspiring discussion. It just is very inspiring in the sense that as an artist you feel you are really in a symbiosis with the consciousness of the cosmos and the environment, and that being like part of the human consciousness, but also like in the Robertina's work, we also see the cosmos consciousness in like the artist's consciousness. If that's like, it's really like one of the same, two of the same thing, and that's very inspiring. Also to think, I mean, it's probably a good time to do research in ecology before everything is destroyed. I mean, and for Robertina, I have a question. It's more like the technical aspect. I think Victoria brought it up at some point, the AI voice that you that you distorted. Just wonder, like, cause I think I heard some reverse sound of that audio clip, and can you share more on like the thoughts behind to include the distorted voice? Thank you. Yeah.
So I was thank you for question. So when I was developing the piece first, there was actually a singer singing a story which I wrote, but it felt so imposed. It just kind of didn't work with the material. I don't know, like the idea of the piece was absolutely different. It should be like some narrator telling you different situations, and then I started to play around with. Like I invited one programmer who is excellent in this, doing different AI audios, and we did a deep fake of human narrator, the story, into the sounds of the river, into the sounds of the rocks, into the sounds which I recorded. Because I just really wanted to have this kind of cloning of the nature, how we are kind of, it's kind of going back and forth, you know, and AI was like the good tool to help me to figure it out, that other framing of it. And then the other day Victoria was actually asking me, so but why you don't say this story and so on, and I was like, it's not needed actually, you know. It's like, yes, I wrote it, it was, but then it was reshaped so much that sometimes we don't need to have exactly the language how we are used that we understand, but you know, sometimes really just the emotion can also be the language which we need. So this was the thing. Maybe maybe they're chit-chatting, maybe they're gossiping, maybe they're pissed off with their neighbor. I don't know, It's like, I'm pretty sure they live their life. And I really like, okay, but like how in Planet Earth they presented first time, it was, I think, presenting the clownfish family. How they are like actually chit-chatting and hanging and talking to each other, and it's not like only because in the natural science documentaries many times the nature is also represented in the way this animal is doing this because of like mating, blah blah. Maybe not. Maybe he's just And now they start to say, sometimes octopus just poke the fish, maybe. No, but it's good to have that possibilities. Give them this agency that they can be also like angry with each other or playful with each other or. Beyond just like being in the reproduction or eating or food related and so on. So I think it's like I see that this is now opening up, and this is something that I'm very excited about. So okay, sorry, I went into the discussion further from AI, but because AI in this piece, it's just one of the ways how to think and see these animals, and I was like feeding in also some visualizations to see if it can understand the creature in the same way I do. So it was just like helpful way how to go beyond how I would represent it. I was just like stuck with that. I didn't want it to present the story in the way the story is presented. Yeah.
Can you just end by talking a little bit about the human fish?
So one of the creatures which you saw in the white salamander, it's actually in the evolutionary theoretical representation cousin in some way from the axolotl from Mexico and some other salamanders which they are also living here in US. But so it's a creature which kind of salamander which went back to the caves. It started in the waters, so it's lost the eyesight. It has really amazing way of navigating through the smell, through the chemistry of the water, and it's also very quickly reacting in the touch and the representation of that because it lives in the cave systems where the food is very limited. But on the other hand, is one of these creatures which I like to say it's a cultural emblem. Like in Slovenia, Primož, I think he's also from Slovenia, he will agree with me. Like, if you ask us how it looks like, everybody knows how to draw it, even that you don't actually saw it in the nature, almost never. So it's very interesting, and that's why I like to have it in the piece also, because it's one of these, and it's actually living in the lakes of the water, which I'm talking about in this river basin. So it goes to this other level, and I researched this in some other works of mine also, how this, how we give the agency or this kind of importance to some specific species, and we put them into the pedestal as pandas. They're like the representation of, the fight for the nature and the conservation. So it's similar also with this human fish or some other animals. I'm pretty sure that in California, okay, you have bears, just for sure. That was in sequoia trees, so I was like avoiding that. But there is always some animal that you didn't saw it never in your life, but you know exactly how it looks like. You know everything about it, and it has also this kind of name because it looked as a white person's skin. Plus, also it's also very connected with Slovenian folklore of dragon. So because it was just like spitted out sometimes from the caves systems, because it lives
kind of
in
looked
the caves.
like one of those medieval dragons when you see like the the 15th century
Yeah,
St. George
it's kind of like the
weird
baby
snake
dragon.
Yeah.
So it was like Valvazor, like one of the Slovenian natural scientists in the 17th century, when he was writing down the stories of people. So it was like they have been killing them because they saw them outside and they have been like afraid, what is this creature, So it's also one of the origin stories of dragons, which really, it's interesting to think about mythological things.
Well, that seems like a good place to end, as we're still in the year of the dragon
from
for
the dragon.
another 6 weeks. God, us dragons, I think, are waiting for it to be done, frankly, at this point. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. We have one more week of Robertina's exhibition. It will be on view next Thursday and Friday. Then we'll take a break for the holidays, and we'll be back again with Yolanda Harris on January 17th. So please come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu and Victoria, for making 1 year project.